Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Sarah Bell, who owns HOTWORX Northborough, a 24-hour infrared fitness studio with 800 plus members. In addition to HOTWORX, Sarah is also the founder of Strive to Thrive Coaching, where she is on a mission to bridge the gap between high performance and well-being in the workplace. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Yes, and I'm excited to have you here. For our listeners, Sarah's full bio is in our show notes. So you can see what she does, what her career history has been. But Sarah, that's really where I'd love to start is have you share with our listeners more about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I didn't grow up in Mass, but I have been living in central Massachusetts in Upton actually for the last 10 years. I grew up in New Hampshire, went to college in Rhode Island, and started both my career and my family in Rhode Island. We moved to Massachusetts about 10 years ago in 2015. And growing up, I was a gymnast. I only mention that because it really helped shape me into who I am today. Taught me a lot of valuable lessons, especially around how to take calculated risks, how to take action in the face of fear, and how to trust in others and their belief in me when I didn't always believe in myself. And so, from a very young age, I knew that I wanted to help people feel better and be well and really feel their best. And initially, I thought that would be through the biopharmaceutical industry, which is where I focused both in my schooling. I graduated with a chemical engineering degree and then went on to work in a large biopharmaceutical company for about 10 years. And it was through that experience and starting a family about 15 years into my career, when my youngest son was about 4, I realized I had really lost all sense of myself, both being a mom of 2 young kids and, really working hard to grow my career. I kind of just really deprioritize myself. And I think that's very common, not only for moms, but parents in general. And even if you aren't a parent, just losing yourself in your roles and kind of defining yourself as, who you are maybe in your career or some of the other roles that you have in your life. And it really wasn't until a friend had reached out to me to go take a new exercise class for a fitness studio that was opening, and it was that class that really changed the trajectory of my life because it reminded me how important it is to invest in yourself
Mhm.
and find things that help you realize not only who you are, but how strong you are and how confident you can really be. And so that one class really helped me refocus and kind of reinvent myself. And the ripple effects were so large. They extended well beyond just my physical fitness and, my ability to kind of lose that baby weight after I had kids, but my confidence increased, my relationships improved, and I really saw my career start to take off. And so just by simply, creating that consistency and discipline around exercise in my life helped kind of expose me to everything else that was possible.
Mhm.
And so through that, through kind of that improved health and wellness, I ended up dabbling in network marketing. That taught me a lot of things about just confidence and not really caring what other people thought and really focusing on my intention to help others. And it was through that opportunity that I got exposed to HOTWORX. And I had always wanted to start a small business. So, alongside my full time career, that's when we got our license to open a HOTWORX, actually, the first HOTWORX in Massachusetts, because it is a franchise, and proceeded to open HOTWORX. And that was um, the month we signed our franchise agreement was February of 2020. And then in March,
Oh
the
my
whole world
gosh.
shut down. So here we were with a license to open a fitness studio in the midst of a pandemic, never really having any business experience before. So that was very much a journey in and of itself.
Oh my gosh, I can imagine. And what you just shared, I think, is really interesting, where you mentioned you didn't really have any business experience prior to opening HOTWORX. And I think that's really inspirational that you just went for it anyway. Like you said, you tied it back to your extensive skills in gymnastics. And I'd love to hear just what that was like, kind of being new to the business world. What was it like for you to dive in and open up HOTWORX when you didn't really have that experience prior?
Yeah, so the beauty of HOTWORX is it's all virtually instructed. So I didn't
Mhm.
necessarily have to be a fitness expert, nor was I going to need to train other trainers. So that was one of the benefits is I had a lot of corporate experience. So it was a really great way to leverage everything I had learned in my corporate job and apply that to this new area where I wasn't as comfortable. So that's one thing I really learned is how to leverage one thing for the other. And so
Yeah.
in my corporate job, I had done contracts with other vendors. Like, how could I then apply those learnings for lease negotiations and doing a contract there? The benefit of a franchise, and this is something that I liked, is it's somewhat like starting a business on training wheels, right? The systems, the processes are there. It's just your ability to kind of duplicate those systems and processes. And the other thing about a franchise is you have this community of people that are also part of the franchise. And so, one, you can draw on inspiration. Like, if they can do it, I can do it. If they can be successful, I can be successful. And you can learn from them. You can reach out, you can look at the people that are successful and say, okay, what are you doing? What can I learn from you? And I think that applies in any area of business, not just a franchise, right? How do you really take a step back and be humble about what you don't know and what you need to learn and who you need to ask for help?
Mhm.
And know that you can't necessarily do everything yourself. It's just being okay with that discomfort and learning as you go and being able to really be resilient. Like, when you fall down and you make a mistake, you move through those emotions quickly, but then you get back up and get back to work.
Totally. I love that advice. And I also love too that you mentioned that the HOTWORX location that you opened was the first one in Massachusetts. And I imagine that had a lot of buzz and excitement that was built up around that being the first in the state. And so I'm curious to hear what that was like.
Well, again, we were kind of in the midst of the pandemic, so that was
Yeah.
interesting in and of itself. Just trying to find real estate, go look at real estate,
Mhm.
and finding different ways to do that. The other unique part of it was that there was no other studios in New Hampshire, or sorry, in Massachusetts. There was some in New Hampshire at the time. And so we were trying to sell this very new, innovative concept because the idea of HOTWORX is you exercise inside of an infrared sauna.
Mhm.
So there's nothing else like it. There was no way to trial it. There was nothing to show people because we hadn't even started construction. So we were really setting up, in the location, like in the parking lot of where we were
Mhm.
going to be. And so that was the hardest part, is just trying to communicate what it was going to look like, cast that vision for people, share the benefits and the results without actually having them a product to try.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And knowing that you just recently passed 5 years in business for it, I'm curious to hear some exciting things that you've accomplished along the way and also how things might have changed since they started back in 2020.
Yeah, so we physically opened our studio in December of 2021. We started construction kind of the middle of 2021, and did pre-sale during that construction period. So the biggest challenge when we opened was we were still in kind of the midst of the pandemic, in a mask mandate in Northborough, which is where the facility is located. And so the beauty of HOTWORX is because you're inside of a sauna, we can control how many people are working out in there.
Mm.
So what was good is we could isolate each sauna. So only one person was working out, but we still allowed people to work out, which was awesome because at the time people really were craving getting back to a gym and getting out of their house and doing some exercise. So I love that we could offer people that. As we grew, the challenge was then getting people to adjust to working out with other people in the sauna with them because our saunas are designed for up to 3 people. So that was something we had to work through as we grew. And so we went from opening our doors with about 200 people that had, taken a risk and signed up during our pre-sale. And now we're at about 800 people and growing. So it's really taken hold in our community. And we have such a broad range of members in our community, which I love, all ages, all genders, all shapes, all sizes. It's really such a safe and encouraging environment for people to come and work on their holistic health and fitness.
That's amazing. And it's also so exciting to hear how much the membership has grown throughout the past few years. And so I'm wondering what might have led to that. Like if you did specific strategies to help acquire new members or what really worked for you in terms of marketing and sales.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is brand recognition and just people. I hate to say people in New England are skeptics, but let's face it, we are a bit. So I think it was presenting it, giving people the option to try it. We do offer a free trial workout, and getting people to really experience not only how they feel in the studio, the culture of the studio in our community, but the results and the benefits that they can feel just even after that single session. So I think the product sells itself in that
Hmm.
regard. But taking hold in the community, finding other local businesses that we can partner with, that we can collaborate with, being part of the Northborough community, being at local events, whether it's the library or the park, finding ways to ingrain ourselves in the community has really helped us grow. Being part of the 495 Chamber of Commerce um, were several of the ways, and just leveraging our membership base, using
Hmm.
referrals to share and grow our community. It's a great way for people to connect because within the saunas, everything is virtually instructed. So it's a great way for moms and daughters, husbands and wives, best friends to connect in a healthy way instead of, going to a bar for a drink or going out to dinner, things that don't necessarily bring them closer to their health goals.
Yes, absolutely. And I also know that, as I mentioned too in your bio, that you own a coaching company called Strive to Thrive. And so I'm curious to hear how that came about and what it is that you specialize in.
Sure. So back in 2021, in my corporate career, I had taken a huge developmental role. Actually, starting in 2019 is when I took the role. But then again, we went into the pandemic. And what I found was that I was experiencing burnout in my
Mm.
corporate career. And so I got to the point where I went to my boss and said, I have to do something different. Either I need some support or I need to leave the job. I just can't handle and manage it. And for many high achievers, high performers, which I would categorize myself as, it's really hard to ask for help because you tend to feel like a failure. And so what they did is they got me a coach, and I worked with a coach through that burnout and recovery, and went on to continue at that company for several more years until I left my corporate job in 2024. But it was really that experience combined with what I had been able to do at HOTWORX and see the transformation of how investing in your health and fitness can really have so much impact on your performance, your relationships, your confidence. That was really what solidified in me that I wanted to do something different in the future. And so I went and got my dual certification in health and life coaching. And now I founded Strive to Thrive Coaching, and I really work with corporate professionals who want to achieve ambitious goals in their career without sacrificing their
Mhm.
well-being. So it's very much a well-being focused leadership, impact, resiliency, confidence, clarity, presence in who you are as a leader and in your career.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you mentioned burnout too, because as of this time of this recording for our listeners, which is the beginning of July, I was literally just saying yesterday how I'm feeling burnt out. And from what I've seen online, a lot of people are feeling burnout right now too, because of what's going on in the world and the uncertainties with the economy and people kind of needing to focus more on their careers and whatnot. So it's just a whole lot to manage, plus adding on your personal lives with families and whatnot. And so I would love to hear knowing that you have the experience professionally working with professionals who are going through burnout and also personally since you went through it yourself, like what advice you would have for anyone who's just going through that at the moment?
Yeah, so there's so many signs and symptoms of burnout that can be easily ignored and brushed off as normal
Hmm.
exhaustion, right?
Yeah.
Irritability, kind of this cynicism, kind of frustration, not believing in the quality of your work anymore. And so you can very easily Google what are some of the signs and symptoms, but really taking inventory of how you're feeling and are those things long term? Because we
Hmm.
are living in a world where stress is higher than ever. Most people experience high levels of stress on a day to day basis. And unless you find healthy ways to cope with stress and healthy ways to regulate your nervous system, that over time is really what is causing a lot of inflammation, a lot of disease, right? Chronic disease. And until we start to deal with those things, the nation overall is going to feel less and less healthy, and it starts to have impact in every area. And I think a lot of companies are trying to do more with less, especially with the rise of AI.
Hmm.
And really we're becoming less and less productive. So we're working more hours, we're becoming less productive. So a lot of my coaching techniques are really designed to help people have the tools, the strategies, especially the mindset to combat those things before they really run into them in their career. So I really start to target like emerging and mid-level leaders so
Hmm.
that they're armed and equipped with those things before they even need them. So they're able to be more resilient to stress and find healthier ways to deal with stress and be able to move through those things. But yeah, managing your stress is one of the most important things that you can do to prevent burnout in the first place.
Totally. And that's a really good point that you mentioned about working with like the emerging leaders because it's the whole idea of kind of nipping it in the bud before it even becomes a problem. So not waiting until it's too late to resolve it, but more so like it sounds like those preventative measures ultimately that you're supporting these leaders with.
Yeah. Yeah, and that part of your career, that mid-level, everything from being like a frontline manager, supervisor, up to a director or department head is the hardest part of your career because you're really squished in the middle. You are not at a level where you're making executive decisions, but you are at the whim of the decisions being made, even though you're not part of that, right? And then you have to
Totally.
cascade that to lower parts of the organization and really drive execution. And so it is a very difficult part of your career that you need to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're able to share, I'd love to hear a really good success story that you've had of working with a client to help them through any of these challenges that you had. As you mentioned, your specialty is really bridging that gap between high performance and well-being.
Sure. So, one of my first clients actually that trusted in me, she's had such an amazing story. So, she came to me after she had left a company that she had been at for over 20 years to go to a much smaller company. And went from selling products to selling services at this new company. And she was just feeling a little overwhelmed. She was
Hmm.
feeling a big sense of imposter syndrome. She wasn't feeling like she belonged in a lot of the rooms that she was in. And she was really struggling with overwork and burnout. And so, a few of the goals that she had when we started working together was one, increase her confidence and feel more empowered in her decision making and her first goal was to take a vacation with her husband and not take her computer and not worry about work on this
Hmm.
vacation. And so we were able to successfully take that vacation, or she was, just a few weeks into working together. And that was really the catapult for her. So she has since gone on to get a promotion at this company. She was deemed top performer in the whole entire company last year and exceeded her sales target by over 300%.
That's amazing.
And at the same time, working really on that work life balance for her, feeling, there's always going to be moments of high stress, right? But she's learned how to keep those high stress moments as short as possible and then get back to her practices that keep her grounded and centered and feeling like herself, which is awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And what you shared there, it sounds like one thing you recommend is kind of people having their habits or routines or practices that really kind of help to keep them grounded and moving forward in those moments where things might be difficult. Would you say so?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge that people face is when they get stressed and overwhelmed, they almost get paralyzed and they stay stuck. And so a lot of the tools, the strategies, the, assessments and worksheets that I use with my clients is all designed on how to keep them moving and in
Hmm.
action, right? And a lot of that is mindset. Our mind can work for us or it can work against us, and that's really up to us. So it's about one, helping the client understand what they really want, why they want it. So, they can draw on that why when times get tough, but keep them focused on the things that are in their control and keep them in more productive thoughts so that they can start taking small steps forward instead of feeling stuck and isolated. And so that's really, when you're overwhelmed, how can we break this down into smaller pieces? And how can you, start making progress and build that momentum so that you're able to keep going and not get stuck, especially in your head and in your thoughts and ruminating.
Absolutely. And I love the point that you brought up about knowing why you're doing something, like why you're setting a goal or why you're doing something specific. Because I feel like me personally, been more mindful of that. And sometimes I realize that my reasoning or my why is for external validation. And I'm like, wait a
Mm-hmm.
second, like I'm only doing this because I want other people to think it's great. Like it doesn't really impact me. And I can
Yeah.
imagine lots of other professionals are in the same boat, especially the types that you work with those high achievers and high performers.
Yeah, and I've been through that myself. I mean, when I
Yeah.
left my corporate job after 20 years, right, I had a lot of influence, a huge network, a lot of experience, and I was well respected. And then I leave and poof, that's all gone. And I wake
Yeah.
up, I have no coworkers, I have no boss to tell me I'm doing a good job. So yeah, the first 6 months of being on my own as a full-time entrepreneur was very eye-opening. It was a huge
Mhm.
identity shift, and I had to work through a lot of the things that I do with my clients myself.
Yeah, which is so interesting. And it's very evident from what you share that you're very multi-passionate. I love that you have like so many different things that you feel passionate about and have your hands in. And I think it's especially impressive that you juggled both your corporate career plus HOTWORX and now HOTWORX plus Strive to Thrive. And so I'm curious to hear how you've been able to juggle all of those things and not reach burnout in your case.
Yes. I would say I have a great team at HotWorks,
Yeah.
especially I have a full-time general manager that is, day to day managing and operating the studio, as well as three part-time employees. My husband is very helpful from a maintenance perspective. So I think we all have our specialties and know kind of our role within that business. And so that's helpful. And then, yeah, that's finding the right way to balance my calendar. So I'm dedicating enough time and energy to both areas. And then, part of the reason of leaving my corporate job and doing these other businesses was for more freedom and flexibility of my
Mhm.
time. And so making sure that I'm honoring that. And my kids hold me accountable to that. Mom, you said you were leaving work to spend more time with us, right? So there's always got to be time in there for them. And what I tell people is you need to define your priorities or other people will. And so I really am
Yeah.
very intentional. I have developed a lot of like productivity tools that I use weekly now because if you don't define what those priorities and non-negotiables are, day to day or week to week, and you don't put them in your calendar up front, then people will just schedule over them. And so I've learned how to be
Absolutely.
very diligent about what my priorities are, what my focus is each day, and I schedule everything else around that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point that you bring up there is just being able to set those boundaries with yourself and with the people that you work with, and also have those routines, systems, or processes that work for you and hold you accountable and ensure that you're as productive as you can be in the work that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for anyone who's listening to this episode who may be considering kind of following a similar path that you did, being able to leave the corporate world as a leader and go off and do your own thing, what advice would you have for them for making that transition?
So I always tell people if you can build something alongside your full-time career, it's going to give you more flexibility and options. So
Hmm.
having a plan is very helpful and it allows you to learn as you go and build your confidence before you're able to like truly make that break.
Hmm.
And it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be mean more sacrifice while you're doing those things in parallel. So for example, having HotWorks open for 3 years while I worked a full-time job obviously took sacrifice and
Yeah.
time away from my family, right? But that was kind of what we had discussed for what it would mean in the long run. Um, and it gave me that flexibility because we were able to build HotWorks to a point where then I could take a salary from HotWorks while I was building my coaching business. So,
Hmm.
taking risk but making it calculated. Like how can you make it work for you? And then I think the other thing is just constantly learning and being open to opportunities. It may look like I designed this life, but really these things, these opportunities came about because of other opportunities that I said
Mhm.
yes to, right? I said yes to go to that fitness class. That's how I was introduced to isometric exercise. And then I said yes to network marketing, even
Yeah.
though a lot of people, judged me for doing that. But each one of those things helped build my confidence, helped me learn a new skill set that then I was able to apply. And it was through saying yes to those opportunities where I learned about HOTWORX, right? And then that exposed me to that. So you just never know what's around the corner unless you're willing to say yes and step outside of your comfort zone and be willing to put up with some judgment from others because it's always going to be there.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that reminder that you shared of just saying yes anyway. Because ironically, I just wrote a LinkedIn post for myself the other day about how we can self-sabotage ourselves. Like we might come across an opportunity and we're like, well, I can't do that. Like I
Yeah.
don't have the right skill set or experience for that. And we say no before we even give ourselves the opportunity to try. And like
Right.
you said, imagine if you never joined your friend for that class, like what would have happened? And so I love that you shared that because it's a really good reminder to just say yes and see how it works out from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm a big fan because the longer you wait on something, you're going all that self-doubt, right? That fear, the judgment of others, all those other voices you hear in your head, right? Those things are going to creep in. And so how can you reframe some of that negative thoughts
Hmm.
into something more empowering and more productive, even if it's a tiny baby step? Maybe it's not
Yeah.
saying yes to the big opportunity, but how can you move, one step closer to saying yes the next time an opportunity presents itself?
Yes, I love that. And for anyone who is also juggling like both a full-time career and a business, because many of our listeners actually are in that boat right now. I know you mentioned advice that you shared around that is to kind of build your business alongside your career until you're able to take it full time. But what advice would you have besides that for anyone who's in that position of just being able to kind of juggle both of those parts of their lives?
Yeah, I think setting realistic goals and expectations for yourself, because sometimes it's us, right? If we're an ambitious, high achieving, high performing type of person, usually it's not other people driving us. It's ourselves driving us. And that's where we can get carried away because we almost get obsessive. And this is what I notice with myself. I just love what I do so much that I can overwork. And so making sure you're setting those boundaries for yourself, right? That you have people in your life, whether that's your family or your friends, holding you accountable to make sure you're not getting close to burnout, and making sure you have things in your life where you're able to take that time away. Like for me,
Mhm.
that's my exercise. I go to HOTWORX every morning at 6 a.m. It's how I start my day. It's my me time. My family knows if it doesn't happen to stay away from me. um, so, making sure you have those rituals, and kind of that non-negotiable for you so that you don't, lose yourself because it is going to get busy. It is going to get
Yeah.
hard. You're going to get tired, and just recognizing those signs and making sure you're giving yourself that grace and taking those breaks when you need it.
Oh, absolutely. And that reminds me of like one of my favorite quotes, which is something along the lines of like, in order to move forward, you have to slow down. And it's like kind
Yep.
of the idea of like, in order to do more and be more and achieve more, like you have to take those moments for yourself to rest and recover. And I think that advice that you shared right there is so important is to have those non-negotiables in your day of being able to take the time that you need for yourself because rest is productive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for moms it's hard because we, want to put our kids before ourselves, and so
Hmm.
we make those sacrifices. But having gone through that and having, missed some mornings when my kids get on the school bus because I'm at the gym, I know that one, I'm role modeling the right behavior for my kids, and I know that I'll be a much better mom later in the day when they get home from school as a result of me taking that time for myself. And so I think we have this guilt before we even do it sometimes, but once you start to do it and you see the benefit both for yourself and the impact you're having on your family, um, it's really powerful. So you have to do it. You have to practice. You have to say no without the guilt a couple times, and then you build that muscle just like you're working on something in the gym. And I use this with my clients all the time because a lot of them are people pleasers. They don't know how to
Yeah.
set boundaries and communicate effective boundaries, especially at work. And so it's like you just have to start small with low risk boundary setting. And very quickly you realize how easy it is and how good you feel when you are able to feel empowered to say no.
Yeah, 100%. Great advice, Sarah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And as we get towards the end of this episode, I love to ask our guests what their favorite local businesses are to support. So I'm curious to hear what yours might be.
Yeah, so when I thought about this, I live in the Central Mass area, so most of these are all Central Mass, but my daily fuel is Red Barn coffee. We buy the beans and we grind it and make it here, but every morning I start with a cup of Red Barn coffee. For my health and recovery, I like Release Wellbeing Center. They have locations in Westboro as well as Boston now. Great Gifts, LCK gift shop in Westboro. For a good meal, I like to go to Arturo's, which is in Westboro. And for some family fun and a treat, we love West End Creamery, mini golf, and ice cream.
Awesome. I love that you hit upon all the different options. Sarah, this has been such a great episode, and I've really appreciated having you on the show. And now I'd love if you could share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to reach out.
Sure. So for HOTWORX, you can go to www.hotworks.net/Northborough. And we do offer a free trial. You can click try a free workout right on our webpage, and we'll help you get that booked. For Strive to Thrive coaching, you can go to www.strive2thrivecoaching.net. And I have all of my services as well as a little bit more about me on there. And then, yeah, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, you can find both HOTWORX and Strive to Thrive there as well.
Amazing. And I'll link to all those places in the show notes that your listeners can easily click through and connect from there. But thank you so much again for coming on today's show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.